The hall of the Eternal Spire was a cathedral of gold and shadow, its ceilings lost to mist and light. 1,000 alien courtiers stood in silent rows beneath the towering banners of their empress, the air heavy with the hum of the hive chorus, a sound like distant thunder shaped into prayer. At the center of it all, I knelt in chains. The floor beneath me was marble veined with black obsidian, polished to a mirror's sheen so clear I could see my reflection staring back. Blood at the corner of my mouth, torn uniform, eyes hollow but alive. The guards flanking me were soldiers of the Vethari Dominion. Tall, insectal beings clad in armor that shimmered like molten brass. Each one carried a spear whose tip glowed faintly with bioluminescent venom. Beyond them, on a throne carved from the bones of something too vast to imagine, sat the alien queen herself. Her presence filled the hall like gravity, her very breath seeming to bend the air. She was beautiful in a way that terrified, tall, elegant, and inhumanly still. Her skin shimmered like liquid bronze beneath the light of the sacred pyres, her hair braided into serpentine coils that framed a crown made of fractured starlight. When she spoke, the world seemed to listen. "Human," she said, her voice soft yet carrying to every corner of the chamber. "You are charged with defiling the covenant flame, with trespassing on sacred ground, and with the death of 2 Vethari emissaries. For these crimes, I, Queen Verithan, sentence you to death by disintegration. Do you have any last words?" I raised my head slowly, forcing my blood-matted hair from my eyes. Her court watched me with hunger and curiosity, waiting for me to beg, to weep, to break. That's what humans did in their eyes, fragile creatures who cracked under the weight of inevitability. I met her gaze and said nothing. The silence stretched long enough to become a kind of defiance. I could feel the tension ripple through the crowd, the unease of something unscripted. One of the priests hissed, "Speak, human." But I didn't. I just smiled. It wasn't triumph or mockery. It was the kind of smile born from exhaustion, from the realization that fear no longer held power. And in that moment, something changed. The hum of the hive chorus faltered. The torches flickered. Verithan's eyes, those pale, luminescent orbs, widened just slightly. She leaned forward on her throne, studying me as if seeing something impossible. The courtiers shifted uneasily, glancing between us. Then she rose. Her footsteps echoed across the marble as she descended the dais, her long cloak trailing like liquid night. The soldiers moved to block her path, but she gestured once, and they froze. She approached until she stood before me, close enough that I could see the faint fractal patterns etched into her skin, like constellations carved in gold. "Why do you smile?" she asked, voice quieter now, almost human. I lifted my chin. "Because you don't understand what I am." The words weren't planned. They felt like they came from somewhere older, deeper. Something inside me hummed, an echo I hadn't felt since the expedition. Verithan frowned, tilting her head. "You are human," she said. "You are nothing." "Maybe," I said softly, "but humans have a habit of surviving what gods can't." That did it. A murmur rippled through the court, scandalized and electric. The queen stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to the horror of every witness in the hall, she went down to one knee. The silence that followed was total. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Her hand reached out, trembling slightly, and touched the broken emblem still hanging from my uniform, the crest of the Soul Vanguard. The moment her fingers brushed it, light flared across the chamber. The sigil burned with blinding intensity, casting long shadows that twisted like wings. Gasps filled the air. Some of the courtiers fell to their knees, others fled in terror. Verithan's lips parted, her eyes wide with something between awe and recognition. "The flame," she whispered. "It was never lost." I looked down at her, still kneeling, her hand pressed to my chest as though feeling the heartbeat of something divine. "You know it," I said. "Your ancestors did too. You called it the Covenant Flame. We called it hope." The words came easily now, though I didn't understand them any more than she did. The memory of the ruins on Farst 9 flooded my mind, the buried relic, the pulse of light that had entered me, the way the ground itself had seemed to breathe. I had thought it a hallucination then. But now, seeing the queen trembling before me, I understood that whatever had touched me that day had never left. The air around us shimmered as golden dust began to rise from the floor. It swirled upward, forming spirals of light that danced around Verithan's crown. The hive chorus started again, but this time it wasn't the low, obedient hum I'd heard before. It was something else, higher, freer, almost mournful. "It lives," Verithan said, tears streaking the dark paint beneath her eyes. "After all this time, it chose you." "No," I said quietly. "I didn't choose it either." She looked up at me, her gaze pleading. "You carry it, don't you? The fire of the old world. The spark that ended the endless winter." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The light emanating from my chest did it for me. Pulsed once, twice, and the whole hall seemed to breathe with it. When she finally rose, it wasn't as a queen, but as a supplicant. "Then I cannot kill you," she said, her voice barely audible. "To do so would break the covenant anew." She turned toward her court, her expression cold and sharp once more, though her hands still trembled. "Release him," she commanded. No one moved. The guards hesitated, their instincts warring with obedience. The queen's tone hardened. "I said release him." The chains binding me snapped like glass under invisible force. I stood slowly, every movement echoing like a declaration. The courtiers watched, their once perfect masks cracking with confusion and fear. Verithan took a single step back, her golden eyes never leaving mine. "You will come with me," she said, not as a question. I hesitated, my body still aching, but before I could respond, the hive chorus shifted again, lower, darker. The priests had begun chanting in a language I didn't know, their voices dripping with venom. The light in the hall dimmed as shadows crept up the pillars. Verithan turned sharply toward them. "Stop!" she cried, but it was too late. The floor beneath the throne cracked open, releasing a surge of black energy that roared upward like a living storm. The priests screamed, their bodies dissolving into ash as something vast and unseen awakened beneath the spire. The golden light that had filled the hall fled before it, retreating toward me, into me, as if seeking refuge. Verithan's crown shattered as she fell backward, her armor flaring with protective light. "You brought it here," she gasped. "You woke it." "No," I said, the truth dawning like fire. "It followed me." And then the floor gave way, and we fell into the dark. The fall seemed endless, a plunge through fire and shadow that tore sound from the world. The golden light clung to me as I spiraled downward, wrapping around my body in thin, luminous threads that burned without pain. Somewhere below, I saw Verithan tumbling too, her armor shedding sparks like a dying star. The air, or what passed for it, was thick with whispers, not in any language I knew but heavy with intent. The covenant flame, the same power that had awakened on Farst 9, pulsed inside my chest as though trying to steady the descent. Then, without warning, the darkness shattered. We hit a surface that wasn't solid but alive, a living lattice of energy, glowing faintly like veins beneath translucent stone. My body slid across it, coming to rest near the queen. She pushed herself upright, her breathing ragged, her golden crown now fractured and dim. Where are we?" she whispered, her eyes reflecting a sky that wasn't sky at all. A vast expanse of swirling symbols and orbiting lights that formed an inverted temple beneath the palace. I looked around, realizing the truth before the words came. "We're under the spire," I said softly. "Inside it." The architecture was impossible. Pillars that stretched both up and down, meeting their own reflections, archways of silver light that pulsed in rhythm with the flame in my chest. It felt ancient, older than either of our species, built by something that had understood creation differently. The hum of the place resonated through bone and thought alike, as if it knew us, judged us. Verithan stood unsteadily, staring at her hands. The fine veins of gold beneath her skin flickered erratically. "The spire is alive," she murmured, almost to herself. "It was said to be forged by the first flame, to contain the covenant itself. Her gaze snapped toward me, sharp again despite her disarray. You shouldn't have been able to touch it. You're human. I laughed once, low and bitter. You're not the first to underestimate us. Her expression tightened, but she didn't argue. Instead, she walked to the center of the glowing chamber where a circular platform rose slowly from the floor, crystalline and humming with restrained power. As she stepped onto it, ancient glyphs bloomed beneath her feet, responding to her presence. "This is the heart of the spire," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "It judges all who claim the flame." I hesitated, feeling the light in my chest pulse in response. "And if it finds us unworthy? Then it consumes us," she replied flatly. The words should have terrified me, but they didn't. There was something serene about the inevitability of it. I stepped onto the platform beside her, and the chamber erupted in light. Columns of fire and shadow twisted around us, forming shapes, figures, each one tall, indistinct, draped in ethereal armor. Their voices layered atop one another, 1,000 tones forming one unified chord. "Bearer of the flame," they said, the sound vibrating through every atom of me. The covenant was broken. The fire was lost. Why do you bring it back? I tried to speak but found my voice stolen. The light from my chest pulsed brighter, and through me came the words. Because it was never lost. It was forgotten. The figures turned their faceless heads toward Verithan. "And you, child of the boundless line, do you remember your vow?" The queen's composure faltered. Her hands trembled as she dropped to one knee. "I do," she whispered, "to protect the flame, even from itself." The figures moved closer, their forms blurring into streams of light. "Then fulfill it." Without warning, energy surged from the platform into Verithan's body. She gasped, arching backward as golden fire raced through her veins. I reached for her instinctively, but the moment my hand touched her, the flame inside me roared to life. Our lights merged, her gold and my white intertwining, spinning into something blinding. The chamber shook. The specters scattered into the walls, their voices now rising in alarm. "Unbound union," they cried. "The covenant cannot merge." I felt it then, the truth buried beneath their panic. The covenant had never been meant to separate species or souls. It had been designed to unite them. Verithan's eyes snapped open, glowing with pure gold. "They lied to us," she breathed. "All this time, they feared what it could become." The light enveloped us fully now, the platform dissolving beneath our feet. Together we floated in the radiance, our thoughts colliding, bleeding into one another. I saw her memories, her coronation beneath a dying sun, her people's wars, the isolation of endless rule. And she saw mine, the burning cities of Earth's last age, the exploration ships, the loneliness of survival. 2 lifetimes folding into one flame. When the light finally faded, we were lying on the cold stone again, the energy lattice now cracked and dark. The chamber was silent. Verithan turned to me slowly, her expression unreadable. "You shared it with me," she said, her voice trembling. "You made me see it." I nodded weakly. "We did it together." She shook her head, tears glittering at the corners of her golden eyes. "No one has ever done that. No human. No Vethari." She reached out and touched my face, the gesture hesitant, reverent. "You shouldn't exist." "Neither should you," I said with a faint smile. Her lips curved, the ghost of something almost human passing over her features. Then the air above us split apart, and the world came crashing back. The hive chorus screamed through the rift, 1,000 voices filled with fury. The remaining priests had reopened the spire's entrance, channeling the black energy of the Dominion's heart. "They're coming," I said, pulling myself to my feet. Verithan rose beside me, her armor reforming around her with a shiver of molten gold. Then we faced them together. The covenant flame burned brighter within us both, twin lights now resonating as one. For the first time since my capture, I saw no hatred in her gaze, only resolve. The queen who had once ordered my death now stood at my side, fire crowning her like dawn. Above, the spire trembled as the darkness poured in, and I understood what was coming. War reborn in the heart of light. The light from the covenant burned around us as the hive chorus poured through the rupture above. Their forms were no longer humanoid but shadows wrapped in armor, spectral outlines of the Dominion's ancient priests, consumed by the very darkness they worshipped. The air filled with the sharp tang of scorched metal and ozone as their voices merged into a single, resonant shriek. Verithan stood tall beside me, her armor alive with gold veins that pulsed in rhythm with the fire inside my chest. The floor of the spire cracked beneath our feet, glowing like molten glass. "They will not let us leave," she said, her voice low but steady. "They can't let us live." I nodded. "Then they'll have to kill us twice." The words felt like someone else's, forged in another lifetime of defiance, but they belonged to me now. Verithan lifted her hand, and the golden light that bled from her fingertips arced into a weapon. A spear woven from fire and faith. I drew in the breath of the covenant, and energy formed around my arms, shaping itself into two blazing blades. Together we turned to face the storm. The first wave hit like thunder. Shadow forms dropped from the rift in cascades of black flame, their limbs shifting fluidly, their movements unnatural. The spire shuddered under their landing. One lunged at me, claws outstretched, but my blade met it mid-strike, cutting through its form with a burst of white fire. The thing disintegrated with a sound like shattering glass. Verithan moved beside me, each thrust of her spear a streak of gold tearing through the dark. We fought as one, our motions synchronized, the flame guiding us rather than thought. Every time I faltered, her light filled the gap. Every time she slowed, mine surged ahead. The energy of the covenant coursed through us, uniting every strike, every heartbeat. The chamber's walls pulsed in response, the architecture itself awakening as if the spire had waited centuries to see this again. But for every specter we destroyed, more descended, their numbers endless, their screams relentless. "They feed on fear," Verithan shouted. "Don't give them what they want." I forced my mind into stillness, remembering the quiet resolve that had made her kneel before me. The flame answered, spreading from my chest outward until every nerve burned with purpose. Then the largest of the shadows emerged, a figure crowned in dark flame, its body shaped like a priest's but vast enough to scrape the chamber's upper arches. Its voice was a chorus of 10,000 souls bound in one. "Covenant breakers," it hissed, "you have defied the silence." I felt the words strike my mind like cold blades. Verithan staggered, clutching her head. "It's inside us," she gasped. I stepped forward, planting my blades in the floor. "Then it's going to learn what's in here too." The giant shadow laughed, a sound like cracking stone. "You carry the old fire, human. You carry what we were meant to consume." "You've mistaken consumption for creation," I said. "We don't burn to end things. We burn to begin again." I raised my hand, calling to the flame, and for an instant, I saw them. The faces of every being who had ever touched its light. Ancient Vethari kings, human explorers, nameless wanderers. Their fire flowed into me like breath, like belonging. The shadow lunged, its claws descending in a blur of black radiance. I met it with everything I had. The impact tore through the spire. The floor fractured outward in concentric circles, the walls erupting into columns of molten energy. The explosion threw me back, but Verithan was already moving, hurling her spear straight into the creature's core. It screamed, collapsing inward as golden fire consumed it from within. I pushed to my feet, raising both blades, and drove them into the shadow's heart beside her. Light met darkness in a detonation that felt like eternity condensed into a heartbeat. When the glare faded, silence fell. The chamber was unrecognizable, half melted, half reborn. The rift above had closed, leaving only drifting ash where the priests had been. Verithan stood panting, her armor dimmed, her crown gone. I stumbled toward her, catching her arm before she fell. "It's over," I said, though I didn't fully believe it. She shook her head weakly. "No, it's only begun." As if in answer, the The spire itself groaned, deep and mournful. The cracks along its structure began to glow brighter, no longer gold but white-hot. The flame was spreading, consuming the roots of the ancient machine. "It's destabilizing," I said. "It can't contain what we've done." Verithan looked up toward the ceiling, where faint beams of real sunlight filtered through the fractures. "Then maybe it's time for it to end," she said softly. "Maybe that's the purpose of the covenant, to burn away what should never have endured." Her words were calm, but there was sorrow in them too. I grabbed her hand. "If we stay, it'll take us with it. And if we go, then we take the flame where it belongs." She met my gaze, and for a moment, the queen vanished, replaced by something purely human. A woman who understood what it meant to bear the unbearable. She nodded once. Then, together, we ran. The corridors of the spire were collapsing, beams of molten light cutting through stone and gold alike. The ground shifted underfoot as we climbed toward the upper halls. Every explosion sent showers of crystal and embers cascading around us. Behind us, the heart of the spire imploded, sending a wave of raw energy racing up the structure. "Faster!" I shouted, pulling her forward. She stumbled once but refused to fall. Her strength amazed me. Still regal, still unyielding, even as her world burned. At last, we reached the great gates that opened onto the palace courtyard above. I slammed my hands against the surface, and the light within me surged, blowing the doors apart in a blast of fire and wind. We burst into daylight. The court was in chaos. The hive chorus had fled, their bodies scattered, their faith broken. The palace spires burned against a sky streaked with red and gold. The survivors turned as we emerged, eyes wide with disbelief. Verithan, once their untouchable monarch, was covered in soot and blood, her armor cracked, her crown gone. Yet in that moment, she was more a queen than she had ever been. She raised her hand toward the crowd, and the flame answered her, spreading through the air as a gentle warmth instead of destruction. "The covenant is reborn," she cried, her voice carrying across the ruins. "Not as bondage, but as choice." The people fell silent, staring. Some wept, some bowed. The light washed over them, and I saw understanding in their eyes. Hope, fragile but real. Verithan turned to me then, her expression softened by exhaustion. "You should go," she said quietly. "They will need a symbol, and you can't be that for them." I frowned. "And you?" "I will rebuild," she said. "Not a throne. A fire that belongs to all." I wanted to argue, but the look in her eyes stopped me. She touched my chest once more, her fingers brushing the still glowing sigil there. "It will never stop burning," she said. "Even when you do." I smiled faintly. "Then you'll never be rid of me." She laughed softly, and for a moment, amid the ruin and smoke, it sounded like the start of something new. The days that followed the fall of the spire blurred into one long ember-lit haze. The Queen's Citadel, once a monument to fear and ceremony, had become a sanctuary for those who survived the collapse. From the shattered courts to the outer terraces, Vethari artisans and human engineers worked side by side to mend what could be saved, guided not by decree but by shared necessity. The flame that had consumed the palace now burned quietly at its center, an open brazier tended by both species, its light warm rather than blinding. I stayed longer than I'd intended, helping where I could, digging, lifting, translating schematics etched in the old tongue. Every night the glow of the new covenant reached farther, painting the horizon in shifting bands of gold and white. It should have felt like peace, but something beneath that calm stirred. A current in the fire itself that whispered of unfinished business. Verithan moved among her people without her crown, wearing simple armor marked only by the seal of the rebuilt order. She never spoke of her old title again, but none dared call her anything less than queen. Each evening she came to the brazier to kneel before the flame, her silhouette framed by the ruins that had once been her throne. The light clung to her skin like memory, as though it recognized its keeper. I often watched from a distance, feeling that strange rhythm between us, our flames beating in unison across the quiet. One night, when the wind carried the scent of molten stone and the sky swelled with the auroras born of the spire's collapse, she called for me. We stood before the brazier in silence until she finally said, "It remembers you." I didn't have to ask what she meant. The flame had grown restless, patterns of light forming within it that almost resembled wings, faces, stories. "It's looking for what comes next," I said. She nodded slowly. "And it's calling us to decide." We followed the call at dawn. The rebuilt city spread beneath us, gleaming with a fragile beauty, but the path led away from it, into the mountains where the oldest ruins slept. Our escort was small, a handful of Vedhari guards and 2 human envoys from the outpost fleets. Together we crossed the glass plains born of the spire's destruction, the ground still humming faintly beneath our boots. At night the fire in our veins dimmed, but never went out. Verithan spoke little, her gaze often turned to the stars. "My ancestors believed the flame came from them," she said quietly once. "They thought the heavens sent it as a test." I smiled at that. Humans said the same thing. We just called it destiny. She looked at me then, her eyes reflecting twin embers. Maybe destiny is just what remains when both species stop running from the same light. By the 5th day we reached the Valley of Mirrors, a place of legend even among the Vedhari. The mountains opened into a vast basin lined with silver stone that caught the sky perfectly. At its center stood a monolith half buried in ash, its surface engraved with patterns that matched the ones I had seen in the spire's heart. The flame inside us both pulsed in recognition. We approached slowly, the ground trembling with each step. "This is where it began," Verithan whispered. "The first covenant." The monolith's surface shimmered as we neared, revealing faint silhouettes trapped within, ancient figures locked in embrace, their forms half flame, half shadow. The guards knelt instinctively, sensing the sacred. I reached out, placing my palm against the stone. The reaction was immediate. Heat surged through my arm, racing to my heart, then outward toward Verithan. She gasped as our lights connected again, spiraling upward into the cold sky. The ground shook, the basin filled with wind and sound. From the monolith erupted a column of fire, but it wasn't destructive. It was alive, singing. The guards shielded their eyes as the light grew brighter, but Verithan and I stood within it, unburned. The column twisted and split into 2 streams, one gold, one white, and merged again above us, forming a single radiant sphere. Voices whispered through the blaze, countless and harmonious. Covenant restored, flame reborn. Then the tone shifted, lower, older. But the balance is incomplete. I frowned. Incomplete. Verithan's gaze hardened. "It means there's another," she said softly. "Another bearer." The thought chilled me despite the heat. The voices swelled. "The flame divides to preserve itself. One to guard the light, one to walk the dark." The sphere dimmed, shrinking back toward the monolith until it vanished entirely. Silence followed, leaving only the faint echo of its decree. Verithan turned to me, her expression conflicted. "If there's another, they'll seek it. The ones who worship the silence. Then we find them first," I said. We left the valley under a sky torn open by the fire's display. Word of what had happened traveled fast. By the time we returned to the city, emissaries from distant colonies had arrived, drawn by the awakening. Humans and Vedhari filled the courtyards, some kneeling, some arguing, all desperate to understand. The flame between us had changed, stronger, more defined. It responded to thought now, to will. Together, we began to forge what we called the Covenant Accord, a pact between species, not bound by faith but by purpose. The queen addressed the gathered masses from the steps of her rebuilt palace. "We will not worship the flame," she declared. "We will learn from it." Her words rippled through the crowd like wind through fire. For the first time in centuries, the Vedhari and humankind stood together beneath one sky without fear. Yet beneath the triumph, unease stirred in me. The light within was restless, flickering like a heartbeat out of rhythm. That night I dreamt of the valley again, of the second bearer rising from the shadows beyond the fire. When I woke, The horizon burned faintly. Not gold or white, but violet, the color of corrupted light. I knew then that the flame's balance had already begun to tilt. Verithan found me at the citadel's edge, her face grave. "It started," she said. "The other bearer. Do you know who?" "No," she whispered. "But whoever they are, they'll come for us." I looked out toward the darkening sky, the edges of the new dawn painted in unnatural color. "Then we'll be ready." But even as I spoke, I felt it. The flicker of another heartbeat far away, echoing mine. A resonance that was neither friend nor foe yet. The flame was calling again, and its next lesson would not be mercy. The violet light that bled across the sky spread faster than anyone could have predicted. Within days, whole regions of the Vethari frontier glowed faintly in the dark, their flames tainted, their warmth turning cold. Reports came in from every outpost. Fires that refused to die, lights that whispered in unknown tongues, soldiers falling into trances and waking with eyes like mirrors. The Accord's first council convened under panic. Humans argued for containment, the Vethari for purification. Verithan and I stood at the center of it all, bound by the same energy that now divided our worlds. I could feel it beneath my ribs, a pulse gone wild. The second bearer was awake. I didn't need scouts or signals to know. Each time they burned a city, the flame inside me flared in pain, and through the fire I glimpsed moments. A shape cloaked in violet, a voice murmuring that the flame was never meant to share. "They're not destroying," I told Verithan one night as we watched the horizon shimmer with unnatural aurorae. "They're rewriting." She nodded grimly. "They mean to make it theirs." The words carried the weight of an old prophecy neither of us had wanted to believe. We left the council the next morning before dawn, following the pull of the corrupted light across the wastelands where the spire once stood. The valley that had birthed the covenant was dead again. No song, no warmth, only ash that sang faintly under our boots. At its heart stood a single figure, waiting. I knew them before I saw their face. The flame recognized itself. The second bearer was human. Younger, thinner, eyes hollowed by hunger and faith turned inward. When they spoke, their voice was gentle, almost kind. "You shouldn't have shared it," they said. "The fire was meant to cleanse, not forgive." I stepped forward, the white gold light rippling beneath my skin. "Forgiveness is what makes it fire, not ice." They smiled, sad and certain. "Then we're on opposite sides of the same sun." Their hands rose, and the world ignited. The clash of our flames tore through the valley, light against light, heat against void. Verithan's voice echoed through the roar as she called the covenant to her aid, her golden fire spiraling outward to contain the blast. The corrupted energy lashed at her, bending reality like glass under heat. I struck first, sending arcs of white light across the ash. The bearer met them with violet flame, and where they touched, the air screamed. Each blow carried memory, every life touched by the flame, every death that had fed it. The ground cracked open, spilling liquid fire. Verithan waded through it, her armor melting, her eyes twin stars of defiance. "You cannot claim what belongs to all," she shouted. The other bearer turned their gaze toward her, their smile fading. "Then I'll make it belong to none." Their fire surged, overwhelming mine. For a moment, I saw the end. The stars fading, the hearths dying, every trace of warmth consumed. But through the despair came a sound, a second heartbeat, fierce and familiar. Verithan's hand found mine in the chaos. The instant our flames touched, they fused, gold and white becoming something new, clear, bright, whole. The covenant sang again, a note so pure it silenced the storm. The violet fire recoiled, writhing as if alive. The second bearer screamed, not in pain but revelation. "It's not supposed to feel," they cried. "It's not supposed to remember. It's always remembered," I said, pulling them close through the fire. "That's why it chose us." The light between us flared until there was no color, no separation, just brilliance. When it cleared, the valley was gone. The monoliths were ash. The second bearer knelt before the last ember, their eyes wide and wet with something that might have been awe. "You didn't kill me," they whispered. "We don't need to," Verithan said softly. "You just have to see." And for the first time the violet light flickered, then turned white. The corruption was undone by understanding, not annihilation. In the aftermath, the flame withdrew into quiet. The world cooled. The second bearer vanished into the horizon, their task unfinished but their hatred burned away. Verithan stood beside me in the stillness, her armor scorched, her breath unsteady. "It's over," I said. She shook her head, smiling faintly. "No, it's begun again. But this time, they'll remember." We stayed until dawn, watching the first sunrise untainted by violet. The light spread over the plains, touching every hearth, every settlement. Through the bond, I felt millions of hearts beating in rhythm, human, Vethari, even those who had once been enemies. The flame no longer belonged to us. It belonged to everyone who chose to carry it forward. Years passed, and the covenant became a story told beside campfires, then a myth carved into stone. The spire was rebuilt as a memorial, its heart left open to the sky so the light could always pass through. Verithan ruled without a crown, guiding rather than commanding, her presence a quiet certainty that outlived fear. I became the wanderer once more, traveling between hearths to rekindle those that faltered. Sometimes, in the deepest part of the night, when the stars burned low, I would feel a warmth at my side and hear her voice through the crackle of the flames. "Keep walking," she'd say. "Keep the fire." And I would, because that was all the covenant had ever asked. Not to conquer, not to worship, but to remember. When my final day came, it found me beside a dying hearth at the edge of known space. The settlers there had long forgotten my name, calling me only Keeper. I sat before the cold ashes, the light within my chest flickering weakly, and smiled. "It's time," I whispered. The fire answered with a single spark, then another, until warmth spread once more. For a moment, I saw her standing in the glow, golden eyes bright with pride. "You never stopped," she said. "Neither did you," I replied. The light rose around us, gentle this time, carrying everything I had been back into the endless flame. The hearth burned on long after I was gone, and every soul who gathered near it swore they felt two hands guiding the fire, one human, one divine. And so the legend endured, carried in light and breath, retold by every world that rose from darkness. Of the queen who once knelt before a condemned man, of the flame that refused to die, and of how together they taught the stars to remember warmth again.